Like, you've
Okay.
promised to end birthright citizenship on day one. Is that still your plan?
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you get around the 14th Amendment with an
Well, we're going to
executive
have to
action?
get a change. We'll maybe have to go back to the people, but we have to end it.
Since the creation of the Union from the Naturalization Act of 1790 to the current day, there has been an ongoing battle to define the borders of citizenship. In the discussion, there is no more influential case than United States v. Wong Kim Ark, and no more influential man than Wong Kim Ark himself. His fight led to the ruling that all born on US soil are United States citizens. Today, tens of millions of Americans from all corners of the world reap the benefits of US citizenship due to Wong Kim Ark's battle. Born in San Francisco during a period marked by anti-Chinese sentiments, he challenged the US government's interpretation of the Citizenship Clause to secure citizenship for himself and all born on US soil. However, his contributions are widely unrecognized. This is Wong Kim Ark, the unsung hero of American citizenship. In the 19th century, the Qing dynasty had suffered many losses to Western nations, losing the Opium Wars and ceding power to foreign monarchs. As a result, whether to escape the instability of the Qing or to chase the allure of Gold Mountain, 300,000 Chinese arrived on the shores of the US during the 1800s. This influx was made possible by treaties between the US and the Qing, including the Burlingame-Seward Treaty of 1868, which allowed Chinese immigration into the US. However, this door would not remain open for long. America in the late 1800s was strife with labor movements, which sprung up in the antebellum US. With the rise of associations like the Knights of Labor, so did the implementation of union practices and strikes. Employers would lose huge sums of money and were forced to make concessions when their workers striked. However, arriving in the thousands on the West Coast was the perfect strikebreaker, an influx of cheap labor in the form of Chinese immigrants. On June 13, 1870, striking workers at a North Adams mill watched with distraught as 75 Chinese walked into the factory, their replacements. The strikers were fired, with the new Chinese workers viewed as steady, active, and intelligent, and working for half the wages. Across the country, in all professions, Chinese immigrants were used as strikebreakers, pitted against the native-born Americans. Public perception of the Chinese turned sour, the labor issue fueling anti-Asian racism that was prevalent throughout the 1800s. Along with anti-Chinese violence against the quote-unquote Yellow Pearl, like the Rock Spring Massacre, numerous legislation was passed limiting the immigration of Chinese. On the 3rd of March 1875, the Page Act was passed, prohibiting immigration of Chinese women, who were viewed as immoral and indecent. On May 6, 1882, the infamous Chinese Exclusion Act was passed by Congress and signed by President Chester Arthur. As stated in the act, quote, "The coming of Chinese laborers to the United States be and the same is hereby suspended. And, during such suspension, it shall not be lawful for any Chinese laborer to come," end quote. Chinese who were in the United States before the act would be required to show proof of identification from a white employer if they left and decided to return. The door to America had been closed. On October 1st, 1873, in an apartment above Wee Lee and Wang Xiping's grocery store at 751 Sacramento Street in San Francisco's Chinatown, Wong Kim Ark was born. He was one of the few Chinese American kids in San Francisco at that time. In 1877, when Wong was 4, the economic situation of the Long Depression forced the family to return to China. Before they left, anti-Chinese riots fueled by the economic disparities and lack of jobs killed 4 immigrants in San Francisco. Wong's parents, like many others, had not come to stay, and the riots were assigned to leave. However, 3 years later, at 7 years old, Wong returned to the US with his uncle, becoming a cook in a mining camp. In 1888, the Scott Act was passed, eliminating the ability for returning Chinese laborers from entering the United States even with a certification of return that the Chinese Exclusion Act had stipulated. In 1889, this act was upheld in the Supreme Court with the case Che Chan-ping v. US, stating the need to protect against the quote-unquote Oriental invasion. However, these developments did not seem to affect Wong, as he was born in the United States, which would have guaranteed his citizenship. In 1890, Wong traveled to his parents' home village in China, marrying Yi Shi and fathering a child, before returning to the United States without incident. In 1894, Wong again traveled to China to visit his family, staying for a short period of time before getting on a boat to America. He expected to return without incident, as he had 4 years prior, but his return would not be as smooth. When Wong Kim Ark left San Francisco in 1894, he prepared a stamped document signed by 3 white residents with a picture of himself to prove his citizenship. However, when he handed the paper to John Weiss, the collector of customs, he was denied entry. Although he had indisputable evidence of his birthplace, Weiss refused to see Wong as any different than the scores of laborers barred by the Chinese Exclusion Act. For months, Wong lived on ships along the coast of San Francisco, barred from stepping foot into his home country. With the help of the Chinese Consolidated Benevolent Association, or the Six Companies, Wong Kim Ark filed a writ of habeas corpus. They argued that Wong was being held in violation of his rights as a citizen of the United States. But Holmes Conrad, the U.S. Solicitor General, argued that Wong was not in fact a citizen of the United States, and was therefore barred by the Chinese Exclusion Act. The District of California ruled in favor of Wong Kim Ark, stating the Citizenship Clause of the 14th Amendment clearly stipulated, quote, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States, end quote. Since Wong was born in San Francisco, he was, by law, an American citizen. However, the case was appealed, reaching the United States Supreme Court. Conrad argued that the 14th Amendment stated citizens need to be subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. That section was intended to exclude children of diplomats. However, Conrad wanted to expand the interpretation to any child born in the United States to non-citizen parents. Conrad argued that since Wong's parents were Chinese citizens, and therefore subject to the Qing, Wong was also subjected to the Qing by blood. Wong Kim Ark was held on boats for 4 months, and spent 3 years on bail as the case dragged on, with the Supreme Court's history of handing down anti-Chinese decisions, as in Li Mung-sing v. US, Feng Yuting v. US, and Che Shanping v. US, winning the case would be an uphill battle. At stake here, Wong's lawyers argued, was every immigrant in the United States, not just the Chinese. They recognized that this case was about the issue of immigration as a whole, and the outcome would affect millions of immigrants that came to America. On March 28, 1898, in a landmark 6-2 decision, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in favor of Wong. In the affirming opinion, it is stated that the 14th Amendment includes the children born within the territory of the United States of all other persons, of whatever race or color, domiciled within the United States. Justice Gray wrote the affirming decision in Wong Kim Ark v. United States, stating the concept of jus soli, or right of the soil, while Chief Justice Melville Fuller wrote the dissenting opinion, stating that Congress had the ability to define citizenship. The decision will protect the citizenship of millions to come. Wong Kim Ark had won. Although Wong Kim Ark's case was a milestone in immigration policy, discrimination still permeated early 1900s society. After the case, Wong would have to carry proof of identification signed by multiple whites whenever he traveled. Records show on October 21, 1901, Wong was detained in El Paso, Texas. Wong faced the threat of deportation before papers clearly attesting who he was set him free. Federal officials warned that the Chinese could not be trusted to prove their own citizenship and, quote, every presumption, every technicality should be held against their admission, and their testimony should have little or no weight when standing alone, end quote. On October 28, 1910, Wong Kim Ark's eldest son, Wong Yuk-fun, a birthright citizen due to his father, was detained on Angel Island and deported back to China. Although it was his constitutional right to enter America, Wong's son was denied as Thai immigration laws made it near impossible to prove parental relationships. Eventually, in 1924, Wong Yuk-su, Wong's third son, entered the United States. In the following years, Wong's other sons were able to enter America as per their rights. Although he fought for the ability to live in America for years, in 1931, Wong left for China and never decided to return. He had his return papers, but the 61-year-old Wong Kim Ark would not see his home country again, a place where he had made so much change. After he left, Wong disappeared from the historical records, with his later life and his death remaining a mystery. Wong Kim Ark had fought for his constitutional right for years, facing racial discrimination for decades after. He had needed to fight for his children's rights, living under the only ever law targeting the immigration of a certain ethnic group. His case remains the definitive interpretation of the Citizenship Clause, with other cases including Plyler v. Doe, INS v. Rios Pineda, Miller v. Albright, etc. using his case as a crucial precedent. Wong's battle enforced citizenship by birthright in the 14th Amendment, with millions in America reaping the benefits of citizenship in the present thanks to his determination. As Norman Wong, Wong Kim Ark's descendant states,
I'm glad he stood up. A lot of people have feelings about stuff, but they're not willing to stick their neck out.
America is a melting pot of ethnicities, a land built upon citizens. Therefore, citizenship has always stood on the forefront of American politics, and today, that is as true as ever. Recent pushes by the executive branch have led to a Supreme Court hearing on the definitive meaning of the Citizenship Clause. Due to this, Wong Kim's Ark's story has begun to surface to the public, with the city and county of San Francisco declaring March 28th to be Wong Kim Ark Day. However, recognition barely extends past local communities, with many who benefit from his fight not knowing who Wong Kim Ark is. Lessons from the past are crucial to answering problems of the present, and his story is deserving to be told. Wong Kim Ark changed America without ever standing on a stage, marching in a rally, or holding office. His quiet determination shaped one of the most important rights in the US constitutional law, protecting the rights of millions even 5 generations later, cementing him as one of America's unsung heroes.
His legacy made it possible for so many people to make their lives, their careers, and their communities here